All right, so today we're going to kind of take a deep dive into BLS International Services.
Okay.
And we're going to look at their Q3 and first 9 months of fiscal year 2025 financials.
Sounds good.
We've got their investor presentation.
Okay.
We've got a transcript and audio from their earnings call from February 12th.
All right.
And we've even got their auditor's review report.
Nice.
So we're going to kind of go through all of the stuff. And by the end, you should have a pretty good idea of not only their financials,
Yeah.
but also what's driving their growth and kind of what their plans are for the future.
I'm excited.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that really jumped out at me when I was looking at this stuff was just how unbelievably record-breaking their financial performance has been.
It's really impressive they're having the highest they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they've actually surpassed their entire fiscal year 2024 EBITDA and profit numbers
Wow.
in just the first 9 months of fiscal year 2025.
So in the first 9 months, they've already beat the entire last year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So let's break down some of these numbers then.
Okay.
So their Q3 revenue hit 512.8 cores,
Wow.
which is a 17.1% jump compared to last year.
Huge.
And for the 9 months so far, it's a whopping 1,500.5 cores,
Goodness.
up 22.1%.
Yeah.
But what I really thought was interesting were their profit jumps.
Oh, yeah.
They're huge.
Let's look at that.
Okay.
So their Q3 EBITDA, which basically is a measure of their operating profitability,
Okay.
is up a massive 78.5% year over year,
Oh, wow.
reaching 158.1 crores.
Okay.
And for the 9 months, it's a similar story.
Okay.
455.2 crores with a 78.3% increase.
So profits are looking really good.
Yeah.
But what about overall financial stability for them?
Well, that's where their strong credit rating of Crystal A+ stable comes in.
Okay.
You can kind of think of it like a financial report card, where they're getting top marks for managing their money well.
Gotcha.
And this is especially important as we look at their growth strategy, which has two main components:
Okay.
Visa and Consular Services
All right.
and Digital Services.
So starting with that first one, then Visa and Consular Services. I mean, they're basically the travel facilitators, right? They're helping governments worldwide process visas and citizen-related service.
And so they've got,
Pretty impressive global reach.
oh yeah, they operate in over 70 countries and serve more than 46 client governments.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
And their margin expansion in Q3 was huge.
Oh yeah, 1,564 basis points.
And they're saying that that's because of their shift from a partner-run model to a self-managed model.
Makes sense.
So basically cutting out the middleman, becoming more efficient.
Yeah, streamlining the process.
Yeah, exactly. So their net revenue in this segment grew by 60.3% year over year in Q3.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And they processed 9.08 lakh applications in Q3,
Okay.
a 27.1% jump compared to the same period last year.
Nice.
And even their net revenue per application increased by 26.2%,
Wow.
reaching 2,837.
So what do you think about this shift to the self-managed model?
Well, I mean, it's definitely working out for them in the short term. They're seeing the benefits of having that greater control and efficiency.
Makes sense.
But I'm kind of wondering how this is going to impact their relationships with their former partners.
Yeah.
Could this potentially cause some friction or limit their reach in certain markets?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It really highlights just the complexities of operating in this global landscape.
Right, yeah.
So let's move on to the other segment then.
Okay.
Their digital services segment.
Okay.
And this is where they're really kind of leveraging technologies
Yeah.
to provide things like banking correspondent services, e-governance projects,
Okay.
and even assisted e-commerce in rural India.
So they're trying to bridge the gap between the traditional services and the digital world.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in a country as diverse as India.
It's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. And their growth in this segment is amazing.
Yeah.
A remarkable 86.7% year-over-year revenue growth in Q3,
Wow.
reaching 137.2 crores.
That's a lot.
And they're saying that a big chunk of that growth comes from their acquisition of Fidelis Solutions,
Oh, right.
which specializes in loan processing and distribution.
It seems like a really smart move for them.
Yeah, it aligns perfectly with their goal of kind of expanding their digital footprint in India and offering more comprehensive financial services.
Exactly.
But they've also made a couple other acquisitions.
Well, yeah, they've been on a bit of a spending spree this year.
Yeah, over 1,000 cores.
Goodness.
Spent on 3 major acquisitions: iData, Citizenship Invest, and of course, Fidelis Solutions.
So that's a lot of capital that they're deploying.
Yeah, it's a significant amount.
What are your initial thoughts on this aggressive acquisition strategy?
Well, it definitely seems bold.
Yeah.
But, I mean, anytime you're deploying that much capital, there are some risks involved, right?
For sure.
So I guess the question is, can they effectively integrate these new companies without running into issues like cultural crashes or overstretching their resources?
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, definitely. So it's like they're piecing together this global network one acquisition at a time.
Yeah, kinda.
So let's talk a little more about each of these acquisitions.
Okay.
So starting with iData, they're a major player in the visa processing space based in Turkey.
Right.
And before BLS acquired them, they were already handling visa services for some pretty big countries.
Yeah, like Germany, Italy, and the Czech Republic.
Wow.
Across 11 different countries.
So BLS acquiring them really broadened their global reach.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, in 2023, iData generated roughly 246 crores in revenue.
Okay.
With an EBITDA of around 144 crores.
Wow.
And BLS acquired a 100% stake in this company for 720 crores.
That's a lot.
Back in July of 2024.
So a pretty hefty price tag.
Yeah, but it seems like they're really banking on iData's established presence and expertise in the European market.
Yeah, it's a calculated risk, for sure. But the potential rewards are huge if they can integrate it well into their existing operations.
Makes sense. So let's move on to Citizenship Invest then.
Okay.
They offer a very different service, right? They help high net worth individuals obtain residency and citizenship in different countries.
Right.
So it's a niche market, but it's definitely a lucrative one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So with Citizenship Invest, BLS is kind of tapping into that world of investor programs. Catering to clients who are looking for things like global mobility and investment opportunities.
Right.
So it adds a whole new dimension to their portfolio.
Yeah, it does.
And Citizenship Invest has some pretty impressive credentials.
Okay.
They've got a 99% application success rate.
Wow.
They've worked with over 1,800 clients from 85 different nationalities.
Okay.
They operate in over 15 countries. And they offer a portfolio of 20 investment programs.
All right.
So in 2023 alone, they generated about 81 crores in revenue.
Okay.
And had an EBITDA of around 37 crores.
And BLS acquired 100% of them as well.
Yeah, they acquired 100% of Citizenship Invest for 260 crores.
So another big acquisition.
Yeah, back to October of 2024.
Okay.
So it's another example of how they're really trying to diversify their revenue streams and expand into new markets that have really high growth potential.
But with that diversification comes the challenge of managing all these different business segments.
That's true. It'll be interesting to see how they balance their focus between all these different areas and make sure that one doesn't end up kind of overshadowing the other.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the last acquisition, out of Fidelis Solutions.
Right, the loan processing and distribution company.
Yeah, exactly. So this one is all about kind of going deeper into the Indian digital services market. So Auto Fidelis has this huge network.
Yeah, over 8,600 channel partners.
Wow.
Spread across 17 states and union territories in India.
That's a pretty big reach.
It is.
Especially in such a fast-growing market.
Right.
And they're handling a ton of transactions.
Oh, yeah. Their average monthly loan disbursements are over 1,500 crores.
Wow.
In fiscal year 2024, they generated 577 crores in revenue.
Okay.
And had an EBITDA of about 22 crores.
So BLS acquired a 57% stake in Auto Fidelis for roughly 123 crores back in November of 2024.
Gotcha.
So this really kind of solidifies their presence in that Indian digital financial services landscape, which is a market that has so much potential for growth.
Oh, yeah, especially with India's focus on digital inclusion and financial literacy.
Right, exactly. So you've gone through all the details of these acquisitions. But what's the big takeaway here?
Well, it's clear that they're not just making random acquisitions.
Yeah.
There's a definite strategy behind all of them.
Right.
They're targeting businesses that complement their existing strengths, broaden their geographic reach, and tap into new markets that have high growth potential.
Right. So it's bold.
Yeah.
It's ambitious, but it's not without its risks.
For sure.
Right.
So
in addition to these acquisitions, they've also been investing a lot in technology to try to improve their services and make things more efficient.
Right.
And their investor presentation actually has a really good overview of their tech stack.
Okay.
And you can tell that they're really embracing innovation.
Yeah, they're using all sorts of cutting-edge technologies.
Yeah, like advanced biometrics, blockchain, artificial intelligence, chatbots,
Okay.
electronic visa processing.
Wow.
They're even using OCR technology so people can process documents remotely from their homes or offices.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're clearly committed to staying ahead of the curve
Right.
when it comes to technology.
Yeah, it seems like they really understand that technology is key to their growth and competitiveness.
Uh-huh.
So beyond just the technology, though, their investor presentation also outlines their overall growth strategy.
Okay.
And they've got some pretty ambitious plans.
Oh, yeah.
So they're focused on things like aggressively bidding for new tenders, expanding their service offerings, providing customized solutions, building a strong brand, maintaining good relationships with governments.
Makes sense.
And, of course, continuing to make strategic acquisitions.
So it's a pretty comprehensive roadmap for growth.
Yeah, but can they actually deliver on all of this?
That's the question.
Right? I mean, there are always challenges and uncertainties when you're trying to grow this quickly.
What are some of the questions that investors should be thinking about?
Well, one of the big ones is whether or not they can maintain those impressive margins while they're integrating all these new companies and expanding into these new markets.
Yeah.
And then another one is, how are they going to manage all these different services across all these different geographies and regulatory environments?
Good point.
So their earnings call transcript actually provides some really good insights into how they're thinking about all of this.
Right.
So, for example, one analyst directly asked about their profit after tax or PAT growth, which seemed to be lagging behind their EBITDA and revenue growth in the visa business.
Okay.
And their CFO basically said that the PAT numbers might look a little bit subdued because of how they have to account for amortization, which essentially spreads out the cost of an intangible asset over its useful life.
Okay.
So he was basically saying that their profit before tax, or PBT, is actually on the rise.
All right. So the accounting treatment is kind of skewing things a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
But their underlying profitability is still good.
Exactly. But then another thing that came up in the earnings call was the increase in their tax expenses. And they said that that's mainly because they're expanding into regions with higher tax rates.
Oh, okay. Like Dubai, Turkey, and India.
Right.
Gotcha.
And their CFO clarified that their tax rate was around 9% last year.
Okay.
But they're expecting it to be about 12% for both this year and next year.
So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. So taxes are one thing, but then another analyst brought up concerns about their capital allocation strategy.
Okay.
Specifically, all these acquisitions they've been making.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of capital. It's a valid concern.
Right.
But the management team emphasized that these acquisitions are all about finding those high-profit businesses that really align with what they're already good at.
Okay.
And they're not just acquiring companies to grow bigger.
Right.
They're making calculated investments that they think will give them a good return.
Okay.
And strengthen their position in the market.
So they're trying to be strategic about it.
Exactly.
And they also said that they're committed to achieving a return on equity, or OI, of about 15%.
Wow.
Which is a lot higher than what they would earn from dividends or interest on bank deposits.
That's significant.
Yeah, so they're really focused on deploying their capital in a way that benefits their shareholders.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's clear from the earnings call that the management team is pretty confident in their ability to execute their strategy and deal with all the challenges that are ahead.
Right.
And they think they're well-positioned to take advantage of the growing demand for both visa and consular services, as well as the digital services market in India.
It sounds like they've got a lot going for them.
Yeah, they do. It's definitely a balancing act for them.
Yeah, it is.
But they seem to be aware of the risks, and they're trying to come up with ways to deal with them.
That's good.
So I think it's important to remember the bigger picture here, too.
Right, the market context.
Yeah, exactly. So BLS is operating in these industries that are seeing some really positive trends.
Like the global travel and tourism industry.
Yeah, it's bouncing back strong after the pandemic.
Which is good for their visa and consular services.
Exactly. And then in India, you've got the government pushing for digital inclusion and financial literacy.
Right.
Which is creating a lot of opportunity for their digital services segment.
Makes sense.
So it seems like they're kind of riding this wave of positive macroeconomic trends that could really help them grow in the coming years.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in.
But of course, there are always risks.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, the global economic outlook is still uncertain.
Right.
And if there's a slowdown that could impact travel demand and government spending.
Which would directly affect them.
Right. And then there's also a lot of competition.
Yeah, in both the visa and consular services market and the Indian digital services market.
So they can't just sit back and relax.
No, they're going to have to keep innovating and adapting.
Yeah, if they want to stay ahead of the game.
For sure.
And then, of course, there's the whole question of integrating those acquisitions.
Right. Can they actually merge these companies into their existing operations?
Yeah.
Without causing any disruptions?
It's a big task.
Yeah, for sure.
But if they can pull it off,
Uh-huh.
they have the potential to be a really major player in these markets.
No doubt.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we've gotten a good look at what's driving BLS's performance.
Right.
And where they're headed in the future.
We've talked about their financials.
Their growth strategy.
Their acquisition.
Their technology investment.
And plans for the future.
So what's the key takeaway for our listener?
I think the main thing is that BLS is a company worth paying attention to.
Uh-huh.
They're operating in these really dynamic and fast-growing markets.
Right.
And they're not afraid to make big moves.
So it'll be interesting to see how things play out for them.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating journey to follow.
Definitely.
So I think this deep dive has given our listener a lot of information to kind of assess BLS's potential and decide way they think.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about how BLS has been able to execute on their growth strategy.
Right.
But what about the people?
The human element.
Yeah, exactly. Can they actually attract and keep the talent they need?
Especially in a competitive market like India.
Right. It's one thing to have the money and the plan,
Uh-huh.
but you need the right people to make it happen.
A good point.
So that's something for our listener to think about.
As they continue to follow BLS.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into BLS International Services.
Yeah, we hope you found it helpful.
And interesting.
Next time.